ASMR Chess and our coverage of round 2 of the ASMR Chess Global Championship. And as always, we start with our featured game, and this is a brilliant game, particularly for this channel. It is played between Hans-Peter with the white pieces and Kamikaze with the black pieces. And just as in the World Chess Championship there is a prize there, of course here we have a prize as well. This is it. This is what my dear patrons are playing for. The Chess Up 2. The most advanced chessboard this world has ever seen. Equipped with a touch screen, it can connect to the internet and allow you to play games of chess on chess.com. But you won't be using a mouse, you won't be using a phone, you won't be using a computer. You can play on a physical board. This is just one of many, many features of this amazing chessboard. And if you would like one as well, you can pre-order it on Indiegogo. And if you use the link that I have provided in the description, you will support my channel and help keep the ASMR chess content coming. And you will support yourself as well, because you will save $50 on the purchase. Now back to the game. And it starts out with pawn to d4. And very soon you will see why this game is so special for this channel. Knight to f6 by Kamikaze. And we know that there is a reason that Kamikaze has that name. That's because he plays a little bit recklessly sometimes and can be very creative. But Hans-Peter is no slouch, so let's see how this game will develop. Pawn to c4. Can you see where this is going? Can you see where this is going? What do you think we will see now? Pawn to e5. The Budapest defense, or the Budapest Gambit. This is a mainstay on the channel. I have made videos with it. I have used this opening as the black pieces to beat many chess computers in my series on chess computers, and it has a long story on the channel. The story is still developing. This is a gambit. The only way to refute a gambit is to accept it. So Hans-Peter plays d takes e5, the only good move in the position, and the main line with knight to g4. I've played with this with the black pieces so many times, but what happens now is extra cool, because Kamikaze has watched my videos and learned about the Budapest defense, but Hans-Peter has also been a good little ASMR chess viewer and has watched my video called the Cool Hair Attack, and he plays knight to c3, and I was very happy when I saw that move. And if you do not know what it is that I'm talking about, let me explain. I played the Budapest Gambit, the Budapest defense for black, against d4, c4 for many years. Then, some months ago, I met a young man at a chess club. I played the Budapest against him, and he played this knight c3 move, and I lost badly. And I couldn't understand it, because this move, I had never seen it before, even though I had played this opening for many years. And it's not in any of the books. I have books on the Budapest defense. It doesn't even have a name. So I went down and analyzed it to figure out how to punish this move, because it must be an inferior move. It is not. With the very newest edition of Stockfish, the very newest chess AI, we can actually see that this is actually the best move in position. In the position, this is a move that has been missed by chess grandmasters for over 100 years. This opening has been played for more than 100 years, and for all that time this move has been missed by grandmasters. And it's a very devious move. And let's see how Kamikaze reacts. I had played knight to c6 in this position the first time, and that is not the best move. The only move to try for an advantage for black, or to not just get stomped, is to play knight takes e5. And here Hans-Peter plays pawn to e4, which is a totally fine move. It's one of the top Indian moves, but I will talk a little bit about an alternative, because of course when you play pawn to e4 here, you are protecting this pawn, so it's not being captured by this knight. That makes a lot of sense, all of it, right? Yes. The thing is, and let me actually just back up. The thing is that your plan here as white is going to play f4 to chase away this knight. Okay, well, you want to play f4. There is something called the Aier attack after a world champion, Alexander Aier. I invented by him to try to punish the Budapest. And I'll show you that, how that works. It's also a very strong reply against the Budapest. So the Budapest is d4, knight f6, c4, e4, knight takes, pawn takes on e5, knight g4, and here, instead of knight c3, Aier played pawn to e4 immediately, with an immediate attack on the knight, forcing it to play knight takes e5. And you can see the pawn on c4 is already developed, and we are already able to play f4, the point of Aier's opening. So you can see it's very similar to the cool hair attack, which I call the knight c3 variation, because the guy that played it against me the first time had some big cool hair. So here on the channel we call it the cool hair attack. So very similar, but we are on one tempo ahead when we play the Aier if we played with e4 and the plane of f4, right? Because we didn't waste time playing knight c3. So if you're going to play e4, then maybe just play the Aier attack instead of the cool hair attack. Also, if you play e4, maybe your opponent, if they play a lot of Budapest games, they may know the critical patterns in the Aier attack, and they may be able to use it if you play something similar. So why not play the let's call it the ASMR chess variation of the cool hair attack. d4, knight f6, c4, e5, d takes e, knight g4, knight c3, knight takes e5. And the point here is, instead of playing e4 or e3 to defend the pawn, how about this move? Queen to c2. I found this move trying to solve the problem I had just outlined with this whole thing of, of getting into, I was, a little dissatisfied playing this as white, that I would get into something that resembled the Aier attack. I wanted something very different. So I analyzed it very deeply with the computer, spent many hours on it, and queen c2 defends the pawn and gives a very, very different, very unique position that you can be absolutely sure if you're playing with the white side, your opponent will not have seen this. What is the point? The point is you can't capture this, because simply queen e4 check, you do something here, and you pick up the knight. And if they can't play knight takes, if they, for instance, then play something like this, then you can start going after this this knight. Maybe you don't even have to play e4. Maybe you can play f4 right away, and you just go into these wild, crazy variations that you will have had a chance to study at home, and you can be absolutely sure that your opponent will not know these lines, because nobody, I mean nobody, plays this with white. This is a privilege of the ASMR chess viewers. This has only been covered on this channel. I'm serious. Okay, but that's not what happened in the game. The game was very interesting in its own right, and we can learn a lot from it. So we start from the top one more time, and then we go into the main line of the game. d4, knight f6, c4, e5, d takes e, knight g4, knight c3, the cool hair attack, and knight takes pawn, and pawn to e4, which is, don't get me wrong, a completely fine move. White is retaining advantage and working very hard to prove that this is an unsound gambit for black. But Kamikaze strikes out immediately. Bishop to b4, pinning the knight to the king. This is a theme in many of this cool hair attack, in many of the variations. The black bishop wants to come here. The pin is broken. Bishop to d2, and we see castles for black. And this is, of course, a defensive move. You can see this very nice castle here with the castle wall, the tower, and the king is snug as a bug in a rock, as I hope you are snug as a bug in a rock in your bed or in your sofa or on your couch or wherever you are, hopefully relaxing a great deal. So you can see it's a defensive move. It's also aggressive, because this rook can at some point come here and start looking at the king, influence the center. Knight to f3 by Hans Peter, asking a question of the knight. Will it move? Will it be protected by the rook? Will it maybe exchange itself for this knight? The best move in this position is d6. That is what Kamikaze plays. And then bishop to e2 by Hans Peter, getting ready to castle and getting pretty close to completing development. Now we see pretty cool tactical sequence. So bishop to g4, coordinating an attack on the knight between this knight and the bishop. And the following sequence is not exactly easy to spot, and I've been developing this concept of what I call the low elo hero, because, you know, if you're like me, you watch a bunch of Grandmaster games, you watch Magnus Carlsen play, you watch Kasparov's old games, this kind of stuff, and sometimes it feels like if you're not rated in the top 20 in the world, then you can't even play chess. But here between us mere mortals, you know, all the players in this ASMR chess global championship, they're all low elo, and I put that in quotation marks because of course they're all proficient chess players, but there's no masters, no international masters, no grandmasters, but these people can really play chess. And of course there will be mistakes, but they are still providing very enjoyable games for us to watch. And check out this sequence here that both players handled very, very well. So it starts out with knight takes knight. Now you cannot recapture that knight, because if you do, you lose this bishop. Okay, black is completely in complete understanding of this and plays bishop takes bishop on e2. Now we don't have time to save the knight. We don't have any way to get out of this attack with check, and our queen is attacked. So we play queen takes bishop on e2, and now we see pawn takes knight. So that's the first part of the sequence. To be very sure to play this in the correct order as to not lose a piece, and both players played that excellently. But this is a pretty forcing line, and white has a particular idea to fight black's particular idea. After this line, both players must have looked at this particular square on d4. It's defended by this pawn for black's side, and if we could airdrop that knight down here, that would be big trouble for white, because there's no way we can't move these pawns backwards. There's no way we can threaten this square with a pawn. But castles, the knight jumps out to c6, looking at this square. What is the point? What is white's plan to handle this? It is a3, and the bishop does not react to this. Instead, Kamikaze says you can capture the bishop because I will play knight to d4 with an attack on the queen. So if you capture my bishop, I will capture your queen. In fact, you will end up losing the bishop as well to the queen, which is why queen g4 is played. Getting out of this, starting to look at the black king. Now, what about this bishop here? It can't move backwards and maintain the attack because it will be trapped, which is why bishop takes knight is close to forced. Maybe we could have dropped it back, but in this way, bishop takes bishop, and what do we have? We have a situation where white has been able to handle the oncoming attack from black on particularly the d4 square in such a way, through these clever little maneuvers, that there is a bishop on c3 that can come in and capture this knight if needed. Now a devious move from Kamikaze. Queen to e7. What is that about? It's about defending this pawn. Doesn't look right. What is that about? Well, it's a way to counter this next move from white. A very interesting way. So white is playing f4, exploiting the fact that this pawn cannot capture here because it would hang the knight. The knight would be captured by the bishop. But after f4, there is a resource available to black, which is queen to c5. So, wherever this knight goes now, here, it will be check from the queen. So it's a very cunning move, and Kamikaze would have had to think pretty deeply about this, because it looks like a mistake. It looks like bishop b4, attacking the queen and skewering this rook over here. Maybe we can win the exchange as white. But the queen drops back. So let's say we did see bishop takes rook. We did not see this, but let's see that's what happened. We just recapture. And white thinks, oh, I'm great, I won the exchange, rook for bishop. That's an advantage. But this knight check is going to win this rook because it's check from the queen. So this rook will have to move. And curiously, there isn't really anywhere you can go. Because let's say you go here, check, king moves, and here, and it's a fork on all these pieces. You would have to move the queen, and then I capture your rook, getting material equality back. And in all these variations, like there's no good place to to put the rook, which is why, I know this is a silly way to do it, but I have to do it like that, which is why we do not see bishop takes rook, which is why we do not see bishop takes rook. Instead, we see pawn takes pawn. So white wins a pawn. But black, of course, has this discovered attack with the knight. So the knight goes to c2, discovered attack from the queen and the king. The king moves to the corner, not capturing the rook in the corner, because then bishop takes rook, we're not winning anything there. No, instead, knight takes bishop on b4, pawn takes. And interestingly, Kamikaze is choosing to not capture this pawn, which would restore material equality. Instead, he plays rook on a to e8, saying that this is the pawn that is more important. And this is a very interesting position. Came from this cool hair attack, and the material is equal, they have the same pieces, but the pawn structure is vastly, vastly different. And in fact, the material is not completely equal because, of course, white is up one pawn, but there are attacks on two pawns currently. So the pawn structure is very, very different there. This is very safe and sound, but not very far developed, not claiming a lot of space. This is claiming a lot of space, but it's quite chaotic structure. The queen drops back to defend the pawn. Now black says, okay, we capture on b4, also with an attack on c4, also with an attack on b2. But the cunning move here, queen to g3, was not only defending this pawn, b3 also defending this pawn on the rank, and this pawn will of course now protect this pawn. Okay, Kamikaze says, okay, I'll go to c5, coordinate an attack on this pawn. I want this pawn to fall. White defends with the rook, rook to f5. Queen goes pawn hunting. Queen to d4, attacking here. Rook to e1, defending. And then this rook comes to e6 with an idea of doubling up and eventually capturing this pawn. Trying to make the defense of that a little easier. Queen to e3, saying we can exchange the queens here. Okay, Kamikaze obliges. Queen takes queen, rook takes queen, but now rook from f to e8. So what is the point? How is this going to help white defend this pawn? The point is that it's not. It's about rook to f3 with a counterattack against f7. So now we see rook takes here. Black is making a little bit of progress, but rook takes on f7. But rook takes on e4. Exploiting the fact that there is no time to play the move that white really wants to play. White would love to have played this. Rook takes c7, then this rook comes in here, and we are just establishing the picks on the 7th rank, eating all the pawns. The problem, of course, is that this move is not possible, because if you move this rook somewhere, we're going to have a checkmate occur like this. This is going to be checkmate. So you have to defend this rook here with this rook. So here check, we can block, and rook takes, and rook takes. So that's how that works, which also explains h3, giving an escape square. So we are now threatening to capture this here. Rook goes back to defend against this. Rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and we are in this endgame, and we can see that black is enjoying the extra pawn, and they say all rook endgames are drawn. I don't know, it's probably tough to defend this, but white has some trumps. For instance, this rook here is preventing the king from joining. So king to h2, trying to activate the king, get into the game. But a6, g4, trying to use the king with these pawns to put pressure on the king side. But black has this plan of b5. Pawn takes, pawn takes. What is the point? The point is that this pawn can work with this pawn. They are 2 against 1. We just need to break through with one of them in order to make a queen. So the king goes to g2, trying to get over to help the pawns. But c5, they are very fast, and the king is cut off by this rook, meaning that white kind of have to play rook to c3 in order to stop the march of these pawns. And with this, the king here is no longer imprisoned in his own castle. So rook e5 defends the pawn, king f3 going for an attack on the rook, but now of course king can come to f7, so that when the king attacks the rook, the black king can defend the rook. h4. Maybe we are threatening some check. So black wants to stop the advance of this pawn. h6. And here, after this very well fought game, here it is that we see the mistake. I think you can maybe hold this to a draw with white. It's tough, and chess is a very, very hard game. But here is a mistake. So Hans-Peter is very low on time here, below 2 minutes, and plays rook to e3, which allows rook takes rook. It's defended, that's not the problem. The problem is that without the rook, it's going to be very hard to defend against these pawns, where they have 2 against 1. And if you have the king over here, so you have 2 versus 2, then there will be 3 against 2 with the king over here. You can defend usually in endgames on one flank, but if you have to defend 2 flanks, that is where it really often breaks down. King is centralized, saying okay, where is the White Majesty going to go? I have access to both sides of the board. White says, okay, I will try to stop these 2 pawns. No problem. Check. Sacrificing a pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Pawn takes pawn. Check. And king takes. 2 pawns versus 2 pawns. King versus king. What is the important part? The important part is the placement of the kings. The 2 versus 1 pawn over here necessitated that white would have had to come over here and defend. The king is now too far away from these pawns, and king to f4 basically wins the game. You can speed through the rest of the moves. Check. Here takes. And the pawn, that's all that's left of black's army, but it goes all the way, goes the distance, and it becomes a queen, and this is where Hans-Peter chose to resign. What an amazing game, and it's not even played by some fancy super grandmasters. It is played by the low elo heroes, like very much like yourself or like myself, or all of us chess lovers who may not be grandmasters but can still derive a tremendous amount of satisfaction and pleasure and awe and beauty from chess. So that was the featured game. Now let's go and take a look at the rest of this game, the rest of the games of round 2. Okay, and here we have Dusty Muffin playing against Blumpy or Unusual Butter. These are both sub 1000 players. Dusty Muffin is self-taught and plays pawn to e4. And Unusual Butter is one of our science geeks, professor of electrical engineering, and plays e6. And we see bishop c4. We have seen this before from, I believe, from the same player, and this is a little bit exploitable with d5. I believe in the first round Dusty Muffin played this e4 bishop c4 against the Sicilian and got hit with an e6 and d5 again, and e takes, and bishop this time drops back to b3. So a little bit of an unusual way of playing the French defense against the French defense as white, but it looks okay. Development and a check instead of castling. The check is blocked. Develop the knight, but black is very sound here and castles the king away. d4 taking space in the center, c6, expanding on the king side and castling. Much tension in the center, no mistakes really for any side just yet. But this bishop move, that is what we call a howler. Not because a player like David Howell would play it, but because I would play such a move and then I would howl to the sky with pain and anguish, because this just hangs the bishop. We have all done it. I saw Magnus Carlsen blunder his queen in Title Tuesday just a couple of days ago. Chess is a game of mistakes. Chess, however, is not a game about who makes the first mistake. No, in the words of Tarrasch, the chess game is won by the player who makes the next to last mistake. So it's not about the first mistake, it's about the last mistake. That's how you lose the game. Okay, kick the bishop. Bishop drops back. Come up with the knight. Attack the king. But counterattack against the queen. Queen has to move, or does she? F3 kicks away the bishop, but now could be a potential weakness here against the king, so it comes at a cost. The bishop drops back and the knight drops all the way back. This is statistically one of the hardest moves to find, going backwards with the knight, but the knight wants to reroute itself. H6, kicking this knight away. Where is that knight going? Turns out it's not going anywhere. The other knight is joining the battle, attacking this bishop. Say, okay, you take my knight, I take your bishop. Bishop drops back. Now the question again for the knight. Where is that knight going? Where is that knight going? It goes here. Why? Because the bishop, when it moved back, no longer attacking this square. Clever, clever play from Dusty Muffin. Way to save the knight. C5. Oh, striking at the center. But is it hanging a pawn? No, we take that pawn. We see an exchange of knights. This helps black a little bit on to untangle, and also black is ahead in material. So what is the point? The point is that we can be very swift, play rook a to d1. Look at this. It's defended. King has to move. Why? Because otherwise there would be an attack against the king with a check, which would actually probably win the queen in one way or another. The knight centralizes itself. Look out for this square. Very, very, very dangerous. Can black go on to win this game? Queen comes to b5, but no further is what black is saying. Plays b6. Bishop takes, knight, queen takes, and the point, pawn to c3, looking at this pinned pawn, exploiting this pin against the queen. Queen moves back, takes, takes. So this bishop is in a little bit of trouble. How will white try to exploit that? First, the knight comes into the game. Knight to f4. Rook to e8. We take off that bishop, even though as white we are down material. We have a plan. We take off the bishop, pawn takes, and that is the mistake we were waiting for. We have this check now. So you see, there is a check now here. Why is that so important? Because when the check is blocked, we can capture this, and material equality have been restored. That is very, very cunning play from white, I must say. Very impressive. Queen is attacked. Queen goes here. But is there a problem? Check. Oops. And it's an attack from the rook. So making that mistake, being in such great trouble, and all of a sudden, look at this, completely winning for white. So an amazing comeback, and the game is over. White wins. Dusty Muffin wins. Now we have M. Jackson versus Turtle Dove, who I can see from this flag is Danish, like somebody else I know. d4, knight f6, c4. Well, we see the Budapest defense. g6, no, okay. Knight c3. This is a King's Indian bishop. Fianchettos itself. e4, d6, protecting against e5. Bishop e2, castles. And I've had this position like 1 million times, and my pit system is to play h4 with an idea of h5. Not completely sound, but you can get some amazing hack attacks going. Knight f3, that is the orthodox variation. Bishop g4, castles, knight c6, bishop e3, and e5. This is like they're playing like grandmasters. This is all theory. You can also see they're just blitzing out these moves. They're playing them instantly because they know the position. d5. Knight goes back. b4. This square is very important in this opening, so we are looking at it, so we can at some point play pawn to c5, and we are also very concerned to make absolutely sure that no knight will ever land on c5. We do not want to see a black knight on c5. c6, striking at the center. Queen d2. This is something we've seen a million times before. We will probably want to exchange this bishop for this bishop. Takes, takes. Rook develops, making room for the bishop to drop back in case of bishop h6. But bishop h6 and bishop h8 is exactly what we see. Rook ac1. The tension here is enormous. Very soon this will have to be resolved. b6. And the bishop drops back. It's saying I have nothing really to do on h6, but I can attack this knight. c5 and b5. So there was all that tension here, and now it's all blocked up. a6, reigniting the tension. Saying I can come in and capture here. It's ignored. h4, a takes, and knight takes. That's a very nice knight. Look at that. Looking at e6. So that's defended. Again, one of these moves from that we also saw in the earlier game. Very hard to find a backwards knight move, but it is defending here. It's a little bit of discombobulation though of the pieces on the back rank. Queen e2, making sure the pieces are ready for h5. Queen d7, bishop takes, and here is h5. The hack attack has begun. The bishop drops back to protect the king, but bishop to g4 with an attack against the queen. Queen drops back. Start chipping away at the king with h takes g6, h takes g6, rook c3, knight a7. Queen is now protecting here. This knight is very, very weird. Knight on the rim is dim, but there is method to the madness from our Danish Viking friend here, because this knight has to be dislodged. We have to do something about it, and this knight really wants to trade itself off. a4, the knight is super protected. Queen comes out to g5, knight takes d6. What? How was that allowed? The queen comes out here and is no longer defending here. Rook e7. Maybe we should have seen knight takes b5. Maybe we should have seen that. Or is this a cunning plan? Is this knight going to be trapped here? Let's take a look. Rook h3, rook d8, knight b5. The knight comes back, and now we see knight takes knight and a takes. So this is a good version for white, because white was able to get rid of the d6 pawn. Now this d5 pawn is potentially super strong. f6, rook g3 with an attack against the queen, king f8, getting out of dodge. Look, this can potentially be very, very dangerous. Bishop here though. No time to capture it, not with the queen. It's defended, not with the pawn. We lose the queen. So queen f4. Great discombobulation. Great discombobulation. Bishop takes g6, bishop h6, queen h5. Is there any way to survive this? Material looks almost equal, but the king position of black, the swarming white pieces are coming like killer bees on a swarm against this king. However, the rook joins the defense. Rook f3, asking questions of the queen. Queen g5, queen takes. queen takes. Bishop takes. So no longer a queen in the attack. That takes care of a lot of the checkmate threats. Or does it? Bishop f5, rook a7, and rook h3. Saying I want to penetrate with this rook. That would be check. If we can get the other rook involved, we are close to winning. Of course, if the king comes up after this check, we see a check here, winning this rook. Therefore, rook a4, check, check, and rook to b7. Jettisoning this pawn to get this pawn with check. This rook has not joined the game yet. King c7. Takes the rook, check, king has to move, and now we get the rook. Looks like black is toast, but it's not over till it's over. Chess is not about who makes the first mistake, it's about the last mistake. Okay, rook to b4 with an attack against this pawn. We take this pawn, so we lose a pawn, black lost a pawn, and we can't capture this. Is it all over? Attacking here. And what will white play? Rook to a6. That is check, but the problem is king takes rook. And all of a sudden the tables have turned 100%. Black is now winning this. One mistake, that's all it takes. But was that the last mistake though? Was that the last mistake? Bishop g4, rook takes e4, and bishop f3. Rook back to b4, king f1, and rook takes. King comes in, king d4, saying, the black king is saying, no, you're not getting further in, I want my advantage. d6, wait a minute. That pawn, it's getting close to the back rank. Will it become a queen? Rook c8, d7. Oh my god. Rook check. King goes here. Rook check, but the bishop can block. Are we able to stop this pawn now? Pawn advancing, becoming a queen. That's check. Bishop d2 check. King moves. Now anywhere this bishop goes, it will be check, and it goes here. That's check, so we can't capture it with the rook. King has to move. Bishop drops all the way back and stops the pawn. Rook a8, saying to the bishop, get out of here. Rook takes d1. So white only has this rook and this pawn. Rook takes. Okay, now we have rook and pawn versus two rooks. King d5 though, attacking the pawn. And I think this is the mistake. I think this is the mistake. Let me turn on evaluation. No, it's fine, it's fine. It's fine. White may be able to draw this. White may be able to. Check. King goes up. King g4. And makes a knight. He makes a knight. d8 equals knight. Why a knight? Because it's check, and also because it's cool to under promote. Rook takes, and I think rook takes. I don't even think you had to take that knight. Rook takes, king here, and look how close we are to being evil material now. This game is crazy. Rook f4, rook d2. 2 pawns for white against one pawn, and then rook versus rook. Great advantage for black. Good drawing chances for white. And who will make the last mistake? King f5, king h3, and king e4. Very active king for black. King g3, not much to do for white. King e3 attacking the rook. Rook goes to d5, saying if you advance this pawn, I'm going to capture this. That will be a draw. Therefore e4. King h3, not much to do for white, but sit around and wait. Rook f2, g4. Now we're saying, okay, we will attack. We will try to exchange this one for this one, and maybe we can defend against this one. However, Rook f3, that is check. King h4, King f2. What is that king doing? I'll show you what that king is doing. King h5, e3, getting close to promoting. Rook d1 and e2. The king is defending the queening square, and this rook is attacked. It will have to move somewhere. It can't go here. It will be captured. And that is why in this position the game is over and black wins. So Turtledove wins this game. Thank you very much to you amazing players for providing this very, very exciting game for us. Now we have Wilson versus Haley for the next game. So it's e4 c6. This is not something we haven't seen before. This is the Caro Khan. d4, d5, e5, the advanced Caro Khan, or not the advanced, but the advanced Caro Khan, where the pawn advances. The bishop comes out. That's part of this theory. h4, that's a cunning opening idea in this variation to trap the bishop. Bishop wants to be able to drop back all the way to h7, therefore we see h6, g4 attacks the bishop, and bishop h7, the bishop is snug as a bug in a rock. Knight f3, e6, and bishop d3, saying you spent all these moves getting this bishop into this good position. How about we just exchange them? Bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, and c5, the thematic break, putting pressure on the center. The center is defended. c3, knight c6, mounting up the pressure. Knight a3 and a6. So knight a3 is of course threatening this. So a6 defends that. Bishop e3, defending the center. Queen b6, attacking the center. But could there be problems? This bishop lining up the queen. Also the queen is looking here. D takes, bishop takes, and queen takes. What is the point of all that? The point is to make this knight a strong piece, playing c4. So if pawn takes, we get the knight close to the center, looking at this super dangerous square where it can come in with a check. Rook d8, rook d1 though. Queen b4, that is check. Is it hanging the b2 pawn? Is white hanging this pawn? Queen d2, no. But pawn takes. Problems. Attack against the queen. Queen takes queen. Rook takes rook, king takes rook, and then knight takes. So how is this? Let's count the pawns, always a good idea. 7 pawns versus 6 pawns. So after all of that, we have black with 1 extra pawn, but I would say white is a little further developed. This pawn is pretty good. If we can play something like this and this, it should all be fine. Knight takes c5, the pawn has been recaptured, but knight takes a2, and black is still up a pawn. Knight d6, we talked about that square earlier. That is a very nice square. It checks the king, it's very hard to challenge the knight, and it's very nicely protected by this pawn. King e7. Knight takes, so gaining a pawn. f6, sorry, challenging, but it is defended. King e2, pawn takes pawn, knight takes pawn, attacking the knight with the king f6, f4 defending, knight e7, getting ready to get the rook out finally, but g5. That's check, h takes. Wait a minute, we can't play h takes, or can we? We can play h takes, check, king f5. No time to take the rook because the pawn captured with check, therefore rook takes. And that is probably going to be decisive. Losing that rook looks very, very tough. But king takes f4, knight d3 check, king takes g4, gaining these 2 pawns at least, and knight bc5. So we could end in some situation where it's going to be very hard to checkmate. If white can control the black pawns, it shouldn't be a problem, but it's hard to control the pawns. Knight g6, rook h1, knight f4 check, knight takes, king takes, and knight takes e6 check. King moves and the pawn drops with knight takes g7. Now I'm sure white can win this. Are you sure? Knight b4, rook check, king moves, and we take the knight, and that is how the game is going to end. Like so. So Wilson's showing some good technique here, and that is checkmate. What an exciting game, what an exciting game. So thank you to you 2 awesome people for playing that exciting game. Now we have CJ, who is a fellow YouTuber, has even done ASMR chess videos. He's analyzed ASMR style games of chess on his channel. He's not active anymore, but CJSMR is his channel. You can go and check it out. There are awesome videos there. He has a very nice voice. And playing against Farr, one of the heroes of longtime heroes of the ASMR chess patron support group. c4, c5, symmetrical English. Knight c3, knight c6, knight f3, knight f6. Sometimes these 4 knights symmetrical English openings are very boring. This game, not so much. Not a boring game at all. g3, e6, bishop g2, d5, c takes d5, knight takes d5, knight takes knight takes d5, and e takes d5. And here comes the point, d4. c4. Advancing, not capturing here. I think probably leave that pawn, nicely defended by the bishop. I think you can get in trouble if you overextend and you neglect development. All these pieces still on the back rank. b3 challenging, but b5 defending. Castles, bishop d6, a4 and a6. So this looks kind of funny. All these pawns being challenged by these pawns. A takes and knight b4. Where is that knight going? Where is that knight going? Knight e5, bishop b7, bishop takes c4, and a takes b4. Rook takes a8, bishop, oh excuse me, queen takes a8, but c takes b5. I think maybe in this position, saying I don't really want this pawn, I'm actually just going to push here, c5. But maybe not, because bishop takes, pawn takes. So probably CJ is right, just pawn takes. Castles, Farr castles, bishop f4. Who is really better here? I think white really is really happy with this pawn. This pawn is also a bit of an advantage, but this pawn could have great potential. Queen a4, knight c6, knight takes c6, bishop takes c6, rook d8. excuse me, not bishop takes c6, bishop takes d6, of course, and rook d8. Getting out of the attack. Bishop c4, queen takes b4, queen takes b5, bishop c5, queen takes b5, and queen d2. Where is that queen going? I think it has ideas of coordinating with the bishop. Knight a5, queen g5. Look at that. Could be problems. f6. Ben Feingold screaming in his grave. Never play f6. But is it justified here? Queen e3. Now the queen is looking to come in here with check. Knight b3. Is this check going to be winning, or takes, and black is fine? Neither. Rook to b1, pinning the knight. Rook attacks the queen, queen takes, and that is a problem. Queen takes b3, queen takes b3, rook takes b3, and bishop to c6, getting out of the attack. But of course, black is down a pawn and a bishop now. Rook b6, bishop a6, rook d6, and rook takes. On e2, king f1 attacking the rook, rook e8, and bishop takes. That's check, bishop takes, and rook takes. Simplifying the position. Should be a technical win, but it should be. Doesn't mean that it will be. King f7, activating the king, rook d7, checking the king, king goes to e6. Rook takes, okay. The pawns are dropping off. King d5, rook takes, the pawns are dropping off. f5, and you can see here there is no way that black can survive this. We see a new queen materialize on the board, and another one. So at this point white is up 22 points of material, and that is checkmate. And that is the end of that game. Back and forth, but I think white played very, very well. However, I think I saw some very, very cool ideas for black, and he really impressed me with his play, or they impressed me with their play, because I don't really know actually. So we say they, and showing great improvement, I think. So let's go on to the next game. Thanks to the players for providing that great entertainment. So now we have Aier, and there's a big shout out to Aier as one of the organizers of this tournament, playing against Toby, or on chess.com Bobsky, from the UK. d4, g6, and e4. It's going to be a modern defense. Bishop g7, knight f3, d6, bishop d3, and a6. So we have seen this sort of setup before, and very, very solid for black, very hard to break down. So why isn't that the only opening ever played? Well, it does come at a cost. These two pawns, look at that. Look at that. They are just controlling all these squares. And black has no control on this side of the board. Castles b5, a3. Making sure that a knight can safely go to c3, knight d7, bishop e3, bishop b7, knight c3, c5, and d takes, and knight takes, and bishop takes. Interesting. Giving up the dark squared bishop. D takes. This bishop looks very strong now, since it has no counterpart. It has no counterpart. Knight takes b5. What is that, Aier? What are you doing? Sacrificing a piece like a crazy person. But is this the ghost of Mikhail Tal? Look at this. Pawn takes, bishop takes, That's check. The king has to move. That king can no longer castle. The king will never ever castle. What is the point here? Knight g5. If I were black, I would play the exact same move here. Queen takes queen. Because it's scary. It's scary. You get this piece sacrifice. You get these pieces coming near your king in all sorts of ways. You don't want a queen coming in with devastating effect. Therefore, rook f takes d1. h6, kicking away the knight. Black is boxed in. All the pieces here. But they do have more pieces. Quite a few more pieces than white. So will the sacrifice work or will it backfire? Rook d7, ignoring the attack on the knight. The knight is captured, but the bishop is captured, so it all makes sense. Bishop takes b2. Is that wise? It is snacking up another pawn, but is that really what is needed in this position? I think it is. I think this is a sound way of playing. Rook a2. Bishop goes back, and the bishop is so safe on the dark squares because there's no dark squared diagonal. This I'm starting to like black's position. A6, knight f6, and f3. Just defending. Just saying, yeah, knight, you want to capture here? No. I'm defending. You want to go here? No, I'm defending. You want to go here? No, I'm defending. But bishop takes h2. That's check. The rook was not asleep. It's protecting the bishop. King f2. And bishop comes back. It's so safe. It's so safe on the dark squares. a5. Can we make a new queen maybe? King g7, a6, and bishop coming back, trying to stop that pawn from becoming a queen, but a7. Very dramatic turn of events. That pawn turned out to be super strong, so strong that bishop takes a7 is necessary. And that is, of course, giving up the bishop for a pawn. Rook a takes a7, and rook takes a7, and rook takes a7. And what do we have here? 4 pawns for white, 5 pawns for black, knight versus bishop, rook versus rook. That is almost equal material. And this pawn is under fire. So it has to move. e6, rook c7, rook d8. This check. Is that dangerous? King e2. White's Aier thinks it is and stops it. g4. Hacking away against the shield here on the light squares. Rook takes. So now material equality has been restored. 4 pawns versus 4 pawns. Takes. G takes f3. G takes f3. Knight d7. That has been the problem for this knight. It has had a hard time getting into the game because of these pawns taking away all the squares it wanted to go to. But rook goes to c7 with an attack against the knight. The knight comes to e5 and f4, chasing away the knight. The knight goes to g4. So we have a classic bishop versus knight in the endgame. The knight has short legs. It can't go very far, very fast. The bishop can zoom around all over the board. The knight's ability to jump over pieces is not as important when there are not that many pieces to jump over. But the light squared bishop can only ever go to the light squares. It can never defend something on a dark square. It can never attack something on a dark square. The knight can go to every single square on the chessboard. It just takes a little more time. So it's a very classic and fascinating imbalance. c4. That's a passed pawn. Let's push the passed pawn. Gotta push things forward here. e4, defended by the knight, cleverly. c5, it's ignored. King comes up, really wants to be able to control this pawn. King f3, attacking the knight drops back. Oops, that's an awkward knight. F takes on e5, that's check, but the king takes, and getting closer to this one. Getting closer. Rook d7. That is very, very clever. Rook goes to c8, wanting to control this pawn, but playing in this way makes it possible to here play c6, defended by the bishop. Rook a8, c7. The point here is, of course, the king was just not able to help the pawn because the rook stops it, nicely protected by the bishop, and the knight is offside and cannot help. Rook a3, that's check, blocked. Rook comes back, stopping the pawn from promoting. Bishop d7. Now the pawn is ready to promote. f5. Check. And we make the queen. Rook takes, bishop takes. Why is this game not over? Let's look at why. Knight f7. E takes and push g5. Bishop e6. Knight check. Takes and takes. So this is the kind of positions where Aier has to be a little bit precise. Sometimes this stuff ends in a draw if you don't do it the correct way. King g4. King goes back. The pawn is protected. King h5. King e7. That is the way to do it. King takes. King f8. King g6. King e7. f6 check. Just hurt this pawn up the board. King f8. King h7. This is perfect technique. And then the queening square is controlled. And I will zoom through the rest of the game, but there is no way that this will end in anything other than white winning, except of course if Aier accidentally stalemates Toby. But he didn't. But they didn't. So that is checkmate, and that is the game. That was great fun to watch, so thank you very much for providing that game for round 2, and congratulations to Aier for winning. Now we have a big clash. These are two of our highest rated players. Belu of France, the Carpovian, strategical, very precise, I would almost say professional approach to chess, versus the most zen possum in the entire world, who wants us all to know that opossums are not real possums. The Frenchman has white plays c4, c6. It's a Caro-Kann defensive system against the English. Knight c3, d5, d4, e6, knight f3, and d takes. So the Frenchman, the highest rated player in the entire field, gave up this pawn. a4. So this is serious stuff. This is not an accident. This looks like a Slav defense now, the note boom variation of the Slav defense. So we have had an opening transposition. This is not a mistake. This is on purpose. This knight can come here and capture here, or in some other variations, maybe we want to push maybe e4 or just e3 to capture with the bishop. Most often we will use the knight though, and that is what a4 is about. a4 is stopping b5, protecting this pawn. Bishop comes out, bishop b4, pins the knight. e4 and b5 anyway. Bishop d2, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and knight comes to f6 with an attack on e4, and it looks like this backfired for the Frenchman, for the very strong Carpovian strategical Frenchman. It looks like black was able to protect the c4 pawn. Queen c2, not so fast. Bishop b7, bishop e2, castles e5, and knight to d5. Knight g5. Okay, saying, well, do you know what I have for this pawn? I have this chain of pawns here, and what is that doing? It is cutting the board in half and saying all this stuff over here. Oh, what's going on with all of that stuff? What's going on with all of that stuff is that it is kind of hard for it to come over and help this guy, the king. There is a checkmate threat already. Therefore g6 to stop. Queen takes h7 checkmate, but h4 coming to hack the king to pieces. Queen e7, h5. f6 trying to kick away the knight. But h takes g6. Sacrificing the knight. F takes g5. The knight has been sacrificed. Did the Frenchman take offense to my coverage of his very beautiful game in round 1? Did he take offense to how I emphasized the slow maneuvering Carpovian style of his play? Because now he's playing like Michael Tal, like a madman, sacrificing pieces, almost to say I am not a simple player, I can play in many, many ways. Rook takes h7. This looks brutal. Look at that. Queen d8. And g7. King cannot capture the rook. Rook is protected by the queen. Rook e8. And I think it's checkmate in 2. Okay, he plays bishop h5. I was thinking rook h8 check, king takes, and queen here is checkmate. And I think it is. But bishop h5 attacks the rook. Knight c7 defends the rook. Bishop takes the rook. Knight takes e8. Castles long. Refusing to try for this. Checkmate. Knight takes. Queen g6. That spells trouble. Queen e7. And rook d to h1. And the most chill Posum in the entire world resigned the game because there's no way now to stop rook h8 checkmate. What a game. 22 moves was all it took. Very, very impressive. I'm curious about this variation here. Was it a mistake to, or is it just deep preparation? It looks like it's just deep preparation for white here. So thank you to the two players for providing, well, a miniature, Tal-like miniature. Now it's Shaworth versus Ishon Dishon. d4, knight f6, bishop f4, and d5. Knight f3, c5, e3, defending. This is the dreaded London system. Has a reputation for being boring, but you know what? It's not. Chess is almost never boring. Queen b6, b3, defending, of course. You can't have the queen coming down and capturing here. Bishop f5, knight bd2, e6, bishop e2, knight c6, c3, c3, and rook c8. This is not exactly theory, but these are all very well explored ideas in the London system. Rook c1, this is a great place for the rook. Also trying to counteract this one a little bit. Knight h5, bishop g3. Saying if you want to capture my bishop, you can't do it here, you have to do it here. Okay, knight takes g3, that's fine. H takes g3, h6. This bishop does not want to succumb to the same tactic. It does not want some knight h4 to trap it, so h7 is now an escape square. Knight h4 and bishop h7. Castles, bishop e7, attacking the knight, but d takes c5. Attacking the queen, no time to capture the knight. The queen goes back to d8. Saying I don't want to capture here. I want to focus on this diagonal. Knight h to f3, g5. Ishon Dishon. Don't you need those pawns back here so you can castle? No, I think this is going to be an aggressive game. And actually black has space advantage now with this move. But the king could be... king could be in trouble if the attack doesn't work. Let's see. c4. Attacked on the flank, respawned in the center. g4. Knight has to move. Knight d4. Knight takes knight on d4. E takes d4. And h5. Ishon Dishon is coming for Shaworth here. C takes d5, responding to the flank attack, not on the flank, but in the center, as the great masters of chess has taught us to do. Queen takes d5, knight c4. Uh-oh. That knight looks like it's going places. Bishop f6, but knight d6 check. King e7, knight takes, c8 check, and rook takes. Now I think white is very happy. Bishop c4, attacking the queen. Queen goes to g5 to attack the king, aid in the attack of the king. Rook e1, looking at the black king, h4, queen e2, bishop f5. Keeping everything defended, so that d5, we are defending here, but is it really enough? H takes g3, d takes, g takes f2, check, intermezzo move. Ah, that's the point, so that when the queen recaptures this pawn, then we can come in and capture. Problem is, Shaworth does not recapture with the queen, he recaptures with the king. And that looks like it's a great move. Bravely going forward with the king. It's the kind of move I would play very quickly sometimes, and then I would regret it. Thinking, oh, I have all this wonderful pressure going against the king. Can you see the big problem? Big problem is queen to f4 check, and actually white resigned. Why? Because king goes here, bishop comes here, that is check. You can sacrifice the queen, doesn't work. If you don't do that, if you go here, then rook here is checkmate. So all of a sudden a forced checkmate occurred on the board, and white resigned. What a game. I am so happy that we are doing this tournament. I'm so happy that Aier and Addison are doing all this great work to organize it, and I'm also happy that all these great patrons support the channel and play these amazing games. Let's take a look here at the last game, where we have FRBR chess with black against Yuan with white, and this is a very, very short game. And we see e4, c5, the Sicilian, knight f3, e6, the French variation of the Sicilian, d4, c takes, knight c6, knight c3, and queen c7. This is something called the Taimanov-Bestrikov variation of the Sicilian defense. Bishop e3, a6, bishop e2, knight f6, castles, and bishop b4, f3. So this is a very usual structure. We've seen this before against the Sicilian, but bishop takes c3, b takes c3, and d5. Maybe it's a little bit soft, these two c pawns here. E takes, knight takes, and here the game basically ends, because everybody can make mistakes in chess, and this is one of the times where it's Yuan to make a mistake. Knight is not respected, it is tried to be kicked away with c4, knight takes e3, just blundering a piece, and a little bit of probably steam going on here for Yuan's side. Knight takes knight, played very, very quickly, which of course results in knight takes d1, knight takes queen, and resigns. White resigns this game. So that was the last game. Thank you, Yuan. Thank you, FRBR Chess, for providing this game of round 2. Here we have the standings of round 2 of the ASMR Chess Global Championship. I hope you had a great time, and I hope I will see you in the next video. Thank you very much for watching.